The largest plantation in America just burned down. Here's an example, another one, and another one. But that's not even the craziest part. Nottoway Plantation was a plantation resort. Could you imagine a Holocaust labor camp being a place you could get a spa day, a massage, and chill by the pool? Well, we don't got to worry about that anymore because Nottoway is gone. Let the tape roll.
Hi, my name is Lindsay, and this is a message to white people in regards to the plantation that burned down today. If you need a building to be standing to remind you of the atrocities of slavery, you're doing it wrong. Now let's think critically for a second. Many of these plantations have been standing for a very long time, and yet we still seem to have an issue with systemic racism and upholding white supremacy in the U.S. Like, oh no, how will we ever remember that slavery existed without these buildings standing? Intergenerational trauma? What's that? Lots of white people say, build it into a museum. No, reparations. All a museum will do will be a spot for white people to go to and be like, oh, slavery was so bad. And then that's when they think anti-racism work is done. They'll go on their merry way and uphold white supremacy. That's all that's going to happen. Reparations.
Like, I know that racism in Louisiana shouldn't be a surprise to me, but seeing the comments about the Nottoway plantation are actually so unsettling. I've seen so many comments that are like, that was my favorite plantation. Why do you have a favorite plantation? Oh, I got married under those trees. You know what else happened in those trees? People were hung from those trees after they were kidnapped and sold across the whole world, forced to build wealth for one man. Why are you getting married there? People were brutally beaten and raped in the room where you took your bridal photos. And then it's, of course, oh, well, it's not a race history. You don't even want to teach about slavery in schools. You just want to keep your fancy house. The owners of this place came here with the sole intention of opening another plantation. They have been profiting off of it via tourism ever since. Those slaves' great-great-grandkids are walking this very land. And they still have to work like 10 times harder to get anything that we have in this world. And I'm glad it burnt down.
I don't understand why y'all don't understand that Black Americans don't give a flying fuck that a plantation burned to the ground in 2025. That thing was built in 1859 by enslaved Black folk who were considered property. We don't care.
Oh no, wait, what? That's not a museum? No, they ignore the history entirely? And they do weddings there? Womp womp.
To stay with me because there is some things about this resort and 4-star hotel that burned down that nobody is talking about, and my jaw was literally on the floor. It's very clear that it being a museum is not its main focus. It does seem like they've started giving tours again, but this is for weddings and events. They do have a history tab and a drop-down menu. The only thing you're gonna find is a list of 16 majestic oak trees that are found on the property. These oak trees are named, and for a brief moment I was like, oh, are they named after enslaved people? Is this like a memorial? No, it's named after the 11 children of the enslaver. As I was combing through trying to find any information on the enslaved people here, this tab for cottages underneath where you can stay caught my eye. Each cottage has 2 individual units with a single covered porch and oversized rocking chairs, and I was like, oh my god, how tasteless to have something like that on the property given the history. No, I don't think these are fresh cottages. I think they repurposed cabins on site with welcoming beds and full amenities. Oh, thank God. Thank God my slave cabin comes with a hairdryer and an iron. Well, there's at least one of these still around, but this is an unmarked photo. There is no information about this photo. In fact, the only time I saw anything that had anything to do with a person of color were these god-awful candelabras. With this burning down, we lost a haunted wedding venue at best, and it seems like a place that was literally like Airbnb-ing slave cabins. So
I used to be a tour guide at Nottoway Plantation. Nottoway was not talking about history properly. They regularly threatened my job because I was, quote, too emotional about the historical context and slavery there. I was there from 2017 till 2020 when COVID hit. The amount of ridiculous nonsense that I had to talk about on that tour was overwhelming. Dutch people, when they came in, because there were thousands of people from all around the world that would come in, the Dutch people knew more about the history of the transatlantic slave trade than the majority of people that worked at the plantation. I'm glad it burned down. Make no mistake. The type of history that they were teaching there was a bunch of just headline stuff. It was a bunch of buzzword stuff. I mean, honestly. I'm in Facebook groups and looking at people's posts about it being burned down, and the only thing they're talking about is, this architecture. Oh, did you know that they would hide jewelry in the bedpost? Oh, did you know that these curtains were reproductions of the ones from Gone with the Wind? And the way that the script for the tour was written was framing John Randolph as a slave owner who wasn't that bad. He was nice, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely refused to talk about that. I went against the grain. I even upset somebody to the point where they told me that calling him a shyster was racist. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, he was a shrewd and calculating businessman who put profit above all else, including his own family. And he was a coward who ran away to Texas whenever the war started. There's all this mythology about how, the lady of the house went out one time, and the reason why the house was saved is because she had a knife under her skirt and she was ready to kill those people, blah, blah, blah. She went ahead and said that they could stay there as long as they kept it up. There's zero proof or evidence of any of that. There are tons of paintings all around the house where they're like, this was the family, this was the family, this was the daughter, this was that. And like, none of it is true. None of it is true. I remember whenever the news stations from all around the country were calling plantations and asking them to make a comment on The Knot, that wedding magazine, removing plantation weddings from their advertisements. And I couldn't give any sort of statement, but I went off record and went off. So yeah, I'm glad Nottoway's gone. Nobody who's actually owned it really cared for the actual real history of stuff out there. And they really just wanted to be able to continue charging people $50,000 plus for weddings there. Which also, shame on you if you think that that's a good place to have a wedding. You're an idiot. And no, the house itself was not haunted, but the grounds were absolutely cursed.
He had the most in this region, and that's because when he purchased a slave, if the slave had a wife and children, he'd buy the whole family so that they would never be separated. And so that was good for them. And then in the village, he built a cottage for each of those families so they didn't have to share with multiple families and squeeze into one space. So that was good too. They could hunt, they could fish, so they could buy for their own food. And they also built a hospital for them, and there was a doctor who would visit every week. And the doctor trained one of the slaves to be a nurse to take care of them. So from the readings that we have, it sounds like the slaves were treated fairly well as a slave can be treated, considering the conditions. When the war ended, the majority of the slaves stayed here. And we actually have descendants of the slaves who still work here today. Pretty amazing. Now,
Nottoway Plantation marketed itself as a luxury resort. On their website, they bragged that it was a gorgeous resort getaway with these beautiful trees, this, that, and the other. And then you go back and you find that video of, the tours that they were giving. They were bragging that their slaves were treated very well and that descendants of the enslaved still worked at the Nottoway Resort. Look at the location tag. It doesn't say Nottoway Plantation. It says resort. Let's look at the differences in how history is portrayed by, say, the Whitney Plantation, which I've discussed at length, that focuses on the experience of Black people, enslaved Black people, forced here and tortured here under chattel slavery, which is not the same thing as other ancient forms of slavery, no matter how bad people want to tell you that. It is very, very different, and there are people who benefit from you thinking that it wasn't that bad. Okay? Alexis, me, you can't tell, I am directly 6 generations removed from slavery. Okay? My grandfather's father's, it goes directly back. And I'm a white girl. Do you understand? Do you understand what happens when you don't know your history? Do you understand? And then there's people that are like, well, how are you not mad about the history? No, don't fucking play that bullshit with me, because you don't give a fuck about real history. Because if you did, you'd say, Alexis, I understand that you're a Louisiana archivist and historian, that you've made your whole entire life preserving our history. Can you help me learn a little more about it? Oh no? Oh no, you don't want that? Oh no, you love that books are being banned? Then you don't give a shit about history. I don't care. Alexis, I'd love to debate with you. No. The fuck? I have my degrees. I ain't doing shit. I will give you 16 different books you can look at right now. You don't want that? I got scholarly articles. You don't want that? I got primary sources. You don't want that? Then I don't give a fuck. Because you don't care. Not gonna waste my time or my energy. I am talking to the people who give a fuck and would like to know something. So if you don't care, fucking goodbye. Get a job.
I do not want to hear the motherfucking hate on me posting this, right? Just take a motherfucking second to read this. If you give a single fuck at all about history and understanding the fucked up land that we're all from and how they glorify things and make horrible parts of history a fucking peaceful place, a glorified shrine, all right? I'm just fucking saying, go down those fucking rabbit holes on YouTube.
From her wedding to her outfit choices, Blake Lively has signaled to us that she has a weird sort of attachment to plantation culture. According to Justin Baldoni's website, Blake spent over $600,000 on her personal wardrobe. A huge portion of that budget went towards supporting this clothing brand called Magnolia Pearl. Magnolia Pearl is a luxury fashion brand that seems to exclusively cater to rich white women. People have pointed out how the aesthetic is very reminiscent of the Great Depression. Back in 2023, New York Times literally called out Magnolia Pearl for glorifying poverty. In this plantation-themed promo video for their plantation line of clothing back in 2012, it's just insane. The models are wearing potato sacks. They look not happy to be there. They literally were selling plantation aprons. Not an exaggeration at all, by the way. And the fact that this is a luxury brand, there is something very disturbing about this. I personally think that you can create these exact looks if you just visit your local Goodwill. I feel like Blake saw these photos and thought, like, oh, that's definitely Lily Bloom. Even their brand statement sends literal chills down my spine. Blessed vessel merits protection, soft armor for the divinity, shining like sacred heart from the riveted breasts. It feels like I'm being indoctrinated. None of this sits right with me, and the connection is undeniable. Like, the first time could have been a coincidence, but the fact that Blake went $500,000 over the budget just to spend it on brands like Magnolia Pearl signals that this is a pattern and that she absolutely has some weird attachment to plantation culture.
What you're looking at are the remains of the Nottoway plantation in Louisiana. At one point, it housed 155 slaves, sits on thousands of acres, and so many people are upset that this antebellum home, completed in 1859, is now destroyed. It was built by John Randolph and named after the county in which it stands. And all I can say is my heart bleeds for this historic and monumental house of horrors, pain, and misery for so many people who look like me. I don't know how I can go on knowing this house is no longer standing. This historic piece of Americana horror is gone. I don't think I can take it. I just don't know what to do with myself. Does anyone have the number to BetterHelp? I need mental counseling now. This is just so unbelievable. I don't know if I can wake tomorrow with this feeling of emptiness and despair, knowing that this slave plantation has now burned to the ground. Whatever shall I do? I need some of my friends to do a wellness check on me, because I'm just not right now. I'm just not right.
I've been trying to figure out how to approach this. But if you haven't seen this, this used to be this. And this is the Nottoway plantation home, or was the Nottoway plantation home in White Castle, Louisiana. And just the other day, it burnt to the ground. The cause of the fire is still unknown, but as you can see, it's a complete loss. And the reason I've been trying to figure out how to approach this is because, one, I'm in Louisiana, and there's been a great outpour of sadness for the loss of this legacy. And I wanted to make this video to remind everyone that that plantation home was built by slaves. And the owner was one of the wealthiest slave owners in the South. And when the home was completed, I think it said he had like 158 slaves. He had over 150 slaves when that home was completed, built but with slave labor. Sorry, I've recorded this a few times and I keep going way off the wall and I'm trying to hold it together because this man, and I was going to show his picture, I was going to show his name. That's not the legacy that is lost here, right? Like, he literally was one of the wealthiest slave owners, had, I think at one point I saw something, he had like 200 slaves. When the Civil War started coming into Louisiana and heading their way, not only did he pay to get out of going to war, he left his wife and children in Louisiana at the plantation to try and preserve it, and then he took all the slaves and went to Texas. And then it was turned into an event center where weddings are held, and a museum celebrating Southern grace. I don't know, I'm getting emotional. And we're gonna be sad that it burnt to the ground. And I didn't already say this, and I'm already over 2 minutes, so this is the last thing I'll say. There's plenty of videos out there with people talking about this. This was a sugarcane plantation. Not that if it was a cotton plantation it would be any better, but this man came from Virginia, where his family had cotton plantations, and he switched to sugarcane because of its profitability. And I think I read somewhere that he increased his family's wealth like 5 times over by switching to sugarcane. And sugarcane plantations were the worst kinds of plantations. They were grueling. The life expectancy on sugarcane plantations was low because they were out there cutting the sugar cane with machetes, and then they were boiling it down. And when I say they, I mean the slaves. They're the ones that built the financial backing to build a 53,000 square foot home with 64 rooms. And it was their labor and their skill that built all of the beautiful, intricate details of this property. And it was beautiful, it was stunning. But when it existed, when it was a museum, that was one of the things that was really controversial, was that they didn't fully, like, they acknowledged they were built by slaves, but they didn't fully go into what that meant. And then they continued for over 100 years, right, to continue to capitalize off of that slavery. So I think it looks fine.
The roof is on fire. We don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn. Burn, motherfucker, burn. The roof is on fire. We don't need no water, let the mother.
We do have a silver lining though this Friday. The Nottoway Plantation House, the last standing antebellum Southern plantation house, is gone. Y'all cannot tell me African ancestry is not powerful. Now see, when something like this happens, they celebrate, yay, our ancestors, our ancestors, our ancestors. But y'all the same ones who say you don't have no African ancestry. Do you think yours did that? No, baby, that's African. That's African ancestry. And all the while y'all disrespect them, they still ride for y'all. Open up your eyes. Open up your eyes. That plantation randomly, come on now. You know how strong African ancestry is in this side of life and the next. Please stop disrespecting y'all African ancestors by saying you don't have any ancestors from Africa. Because like I said, when something like this happens, you want to, ancestors, this, that, and the third, African ancestry. But when we have these diaspora conversations, y'all want to come in and say you don't have no African ancestry. Make it make sense. Always be proud of the African ancestry. It's beautiful. We are.
Too many teardrops for one heart. I think that you should let it burn when the feeling ain't the
They will mourn the plantation before they ever mourn the slaves. They will weep for their wedding venue, their vacation spot, their antebellum resort, and attempt to convince you that pillars built by sweat and blood and sacrifice are more revered than the bodies of its encaptured builders. That pillars built by sweat and blood and sacrifice are more sacred than the descendants of its chains. Don't they know that fire is a holy thing? Don't they know that God speaks through bushes that burn?